How influence can unleash the hidden talent in your leadership.
Welcome to Business Matters, a presentation of the Chamber Coalition, which comprises the New American Chamber of Commerce, the African American International Chamber of Commerce, and the Hispanic American International Chamber of Commerce. To become a chamber member, be a guest, or register for our events, go to www.nacc.nyc. That's www.nacc.nyc, or call us at 718-722-9217. That's 718-722-9217.
A very warm welcome to everyone. We are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Matt Norman, who is an award-winning author of Lead with Influence and President and CEO, North Central U.S., Dale Carnegie. Welcome. Such a pleasure and honor to have you here with us.
Thank you, Pearl. It's an honor to be with you.
Our pleasure. So if you could please share your journey and what made you passionate about leading with influence.
You bet. Like a lot of people, I began my career as a doer. And for me, particularly, I was in computer software. So I was a computer programmer, and I was very good at doing that work. But I realized that I lacked comfort in meetings, presentations, social interactions. And so I began a journey of expanding my comfort zone related to the not the doing part of my work, but the relating or the socializing and the communicating part of my work. And so that has really helped me grow and learn the value of those skills. And then also when I'm interacting with others, I realized that if I was going to do more than just do the work, which again, in my case was software engineering, I needed to be able to influence and find work, win work, sell work, and influence others in the work. And so I also worked on improving the process that I follow or the approach I take to gaining buy-in and cooperation from others. So the combination of increasing my comfort with communication and also the process that I follow in communicating with others to influence has really taken me to this place of authoring the most recent book, Lead with Influence, and facilitating coaching and training programs around this topic.
Excellent. So in your book, Lead with Influence, you emphasize the importance of authenticity in leadership. How can leaders cultivate authenticity, especially in today's dynamic work environments?
I think that one of the biggest barriers to authenticity is pretending or avoiding. Often in relationships, we maybe pretend that we have the answer. We pretend that nothing's wrong, or we avoid a difficult conversation. We avoid talking about our feelings. And so authenticity is really about getting past the pretending and avoiding. And when we get past those things, we make stronger connections with other people. And so to get past the pretending and avoiding, one thing is to have the courage to have difficult conversations, to be transparent and reveal something about ourselves, or to invite other people to do that, even if it may be a difficult topic or hard to hear what other people have to say. And the second thing is to build empathy so that when we're connecting with others, maybe in a more tense or difficult type of conversation, maybe they're sharing things that are frustrating or concerning to them, or maybe we're sharing some harder emotions, that we're able to connect with those emotions in an empathetic way to affirm and validate our emotions and the emotions of other people, as opposed to maybe feeling like we don't have permission or we haven't earned the right to share or hear other people's emotions.
And it goes back to a little bit of what you said earlier, getting out of that comfort zone, right?
That's right.
Okay. So what are some of the misconceptions about influencing leadership, and how do you address them in your teachings?
A lot of people see influencers in society, in politics, in business as being the ones maybe with the most power, the best idea, the ability to manipulate, coerce, negotiate our way to our desired outcome. Whereas I think sustainable influence, influence that builds trust in relationships, is really less about hard power and it's more about a soft power. It's about the ability, as we've said, to make an emotional connection with somebody, to make it our idea rather than my idea, and to inspire other people to positive change. And again, we don't always see that modeled in society. And therefore, there's some misconceptions about what it means to be an effective influencer. And I think what we try to really communicate and coach through our teachings is an influence that's based on trust and relationship.
So you mentioned emotional connection and trust, which is foundational to effective leadership. How do you advise leaders to establish and maintain trust within their teams or organizations?
I often think of two types of trust in a relationship or in a culture: predictive-based trust and vulnerability-based trust. So predictive-based trust is when we trust somebody because they met or exceeded our expectations. They were reliable. They did what they said they were going to do. And we need predictive-based trust. And so certainly to build predictive-based trust, we need to have clear expectations. We need to have healthy and helpful accountability. And there needs to be some consequence or implication when performance expectations are not met. So that's one part of trust, is predictive-based trust. We need to be able to trust each other as being reliable and competent. The other type of trust, though, as Patrick Lencioni describes in his book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, he says that vulnerability-based trust is the higher form of trust. And that's the level of trust where we can let our guard down with each other. We can be transparent. As I mentioned earlier, we can admit when we're wrong. We can give somebody else the credit. And so an example of this, for instance, right now is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, has really tried to change the culture of Microsoft to being one of command and control, where you show up for meetings and need to have the answer and not look incompetent, to a culture of curiosity and growth, a culture where vulnerability, where of psychological safety, where people can let their guard down. And many people credit that cultural change as being one of the primary drivers for the exponential increase in market value and competitive edge of Microsoft over the last several years since he became CEO. So there's two types of trust, both predictive-based trust and vulnerability-based trust, that we advise leaders to really establish on an individual and team level.
Okay, and speaking about leadership, as the styles of leadership evolve, how do you see the role of influence shifting in modern leadership patterns?
Leadership seems to be becoming more democratic, more collaborative, as organizations are increasingly matrixed, where leadership, you're not just leading your vertical span of control and authority, you're also leading project teams, you're influencing people maybe in other functional areas. For example, somebody in marketing might need to influence somebody in finance. Somebody in corporate may need to influence somebody in the field. Somebody who is internal facing, in more of a back end function may need to be influencing somebody who's more client facing. And so we have all of these dotted line connections, let's say, that we need to influence in any size organization. And leadership, therefore, is really becoming more about collaboration, about gaining shared commitments, even if there are maybe competing priorities. And also leadership you might say servant leadership or leadership through humility and through service is trending as we realize that employees in any size organization have options in many cases. And so we need to empower and engage team members, not order and command them.
Okay, so with within teams and organizations, conflict resolution is often a significant challenge in leadership. How can leaders leverage influence to navigate and resolve conflicts constructively?
A big part of influence that we talk about is curiosity. I'm reminded of the famous scene in Ted Lasso, the television show, in season one, the dart scene, when there's conflict between Rebecca and Rupert, who are no longer married. They're, of course, the separated couple that previously owned the British football club. And now Rupert is challenging Ted, who's this American who's come over to try to coach this English soccer team. And in this scene in this pub, they're playing darts, and Ted Lasso, the poet Walt Whitman, who says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And the idea is that too often in conflict, we jump to assumptions, we jump to judgments, we jump to blame, we jump to defensiveness, and we don't remain curious. And that's also at the heart of influence. So much of influence is not about telling people what to do, it's getting them to come up with the idea by being curious. And so much, again, at the heart of influence and at working through conflict is taking a posture of, as we say, seeking to understand before seeking to be understood, to reference St. Francis of Assisi. This idea that I'm asking questions, I'm listening before I'm trying to get my opinion heard.
That's very powerful. So, what practical strategies or techniques can leaders employ to enhance their influence within their teams and across broader organizational structures?
I mentioned one of them, just alluded to a moment ago, this idea of asking questions. Research shows, neuroscience, brain research has shown that people are 5 times more likely to buy into our idea if we help them arrive at the conclusion themselves rather than telling them the conclusion. So people own the idea. They support the idea even more if they feel that the idea is theirs or ours as opposed to mine. And so asking better questions is definitely a technique, especially open-ended questions that help people realize things. And so there's been a lot of research that's shown that people that ask thought-provoking questions are able to influence more effectively. So questions that help people see things more clearly, acknowledge things, make connections in their own mind. So the ability to ask thought-provoking questions that help people realize things, is really a key technique or skill in influence. Another thing is to be able to communicate our ideas in a way that's clear, concise, and compelling. A lot of people, when they start explaining their own idea, tend to over-explain or get into too much detail. And so it's really important that we learn how to speak in sound bites or Pearl, I know you're a basketball fan. I think about the concept in basketball of a shot clock, where a team has, let's say in the NBA, they have 24 seconds to shoot or turn over the ball. Otherwise, the ball is taken away from them. And great influencers learn to have an internal shot clock when they start speaking. Now, I don't know if it's 24 seconds or maybe in some cases it might need to be a little bit longer, but that we stop talking. We shoot the ball before the shot clock expires, because otherwise people will lose the message or they'll lose attention. I think those are 2 key things. Again, asking better questions to help people realize things, and then also being able to communicate our ideas in a more clear, concise, compelling way. The other thing I would say too is to be more proactive rather than reactive. I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that I started my career, like a lot of people have, as a doer, and doers often get into a reactive posture. We wait for requests, we take orders, we gather requirements, we are told other people's plans so that we can then go execute. All of that is in a reactive posture. It's reacting to other people. And to be a more effective influencer, we need to be more proactive. You might say we need to go upstream in the conversation, get more involved in the planning, the strategizing, the thinking. And so to do that, maybe we need to do more research and preparation before a conversation so that we understand the bigger picture, or we understand the outcomes that people we're trying to influence or trying to drive. So that it's not just a conversation about the need or the problem that's to be solved, but rather it's about the outcomes or the bigger picture that's at stake. And so again, by being more proactive, by going upstream, by being broader in our thinking, we can tend to have more opportunity to influence as opposed to just respond to requests or fight fires or solve problems.
Okay, so given all of this, in your experience, what are the key traits or characteristics that differentiate influential leaders from those who struggle to wield influence effectively?
Yeah, I'd highlight or reinforce a couple that I've alluded to already first. I would say one is that they are very trustworthy, not just predictive-based trust, but vulnerability-based trust, that it's someone that people feel that they can let their guard down around. And so some of the traits to help us to do that, I mentioned be curious. When we're with somebody who always wants to do the talking, who always thinks they have the answer, who is blaming or deflecting or isn't willing to admit that they're wrong, it's harder to let our guard down around those people. And so the traits to be looking for there would be curiosity, which I mentioned, humility, the interest in others, putting others before ourselves. I mentioned this idea of servant leadership or collaborative leadership, which really requires a submission of our own ego. And that's not to say that we think less about ourselves, but it's that we think about ourselves less, right? So it's not that we put ourselves down, but we think more about the needs of other people as opposed to just the needs of myself. And so those would be key traits. I also think a key trait which I've alluded to, we talked about the idea of being more comfortable, not just doing, but relating, communicating, presenting. So a trait there is confidence. We need to have the confidence to be able to proactively enter into conversations, especially difficult conversations, like we've talked about today in our conversation. So that too would be an important trait for us to contemplate.
And you mentioned one earlier, empathy, which I think is important as well.
Yes, thanks for highlighting that. Absolutely. Empathy would be such an important trait.
So how can one get a copy of your book?
Thanks. Amazon, any other major online bookseller. You can also go to dalecarnegie.com and get more information about the book and we have a course to receive coaching and guidance on how to apply these concepts specifically to your situation, to your role. And people can also follow me on LinkedIn and at mattnorman.com.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Matt Norman, award-winning author of Lead with Influence and President and CEO, North Central US, Dale Carnegie. It was such a pleasure speaking with you, and we look forward to having you back again.
Likewise, Pearl. Thanks so much.
Welcome.
You are invited to the Chamber Coalition Small Business Sense Bootcamp. Join our 5-session webinar series where we provide education and business preparation for small business owners and startups. Learn the basics of business planning, how to finance your business alternatives and your credit as an asset, marketing and social media strategies, small business solutions, legal, tax, accounting, banking, and insurance, and how to do business with the government and corporations. Register at startupsbootcamp.eventbrite.com.